It's about dealing with yourself, knowing what your own weaknesses are and being able to work on those and develop those, and really understanding that you have a professional role and it's not all about yourself as a person, but it's often about you as a professional.
What are the potential pitfalls for new middle leaders? In this programme, leadership expert Mary Dawe and teachers from the Crest Girls Academy offer tips on surviving the early days.
Managing change is really key for middle leaders because they are often part of the change process. They're the new head of department who's in and has to then deal with some issues. There's an agenda, often they've been given by the head. The agenda, the head says, I would like you to come into this school and do X. And the middle leader not only has to establish themselves, but also establish whatever the new issue is that they're dealing with.
Central to staff morale is knowledge, because I find that often when things go wrong or when times are hard, if staff just know the rationale behind leaders' decisions, 90% of staff will go, oh, okay then, I understand, you've got a hard time too, we'll all work together.
How are they going to sell themselves? How are they going to sell the idea? How are they going to get their stakeholders? Who's going to be involved with them? Who's going to help them in that route, in that change?
It's virtually impossible to get everybody together to actually discuss what we're doing, where we're going, to provide information. So essentially what I do is every week or every couple of weeks I send out an email to everybody that's involved, coded with their staff codes, so they can only have to read the certain sections that are relevant to them, so that I can give that information to them on an ongoing basis, keep them up to date, keep them involved.
Communicating and sharing what your values are and really what your moral purpose is, and seeing if there is some sharing among the group. And from that, building up a vision of what you really want for the team you're working with.
Be patient about getting those things done. Don't expect your ideas to happen straight away. Don't expect everybody to jump on board with what you want to do. Take your time, see the bigger picture.
I do think it's always worth using a very simple way of working. I would always say to a member of staff, what do you think went well in that lesson? And get them to talk about the things they thought went well and discuss those with them. And then, what would be even better if? So what you're doing there, you're depersonalizing it. It's not them, it's their pedagogy. It's not what's wrong with them as a person, it's what they're doing, what their pedagogy is.
With the new Ofsted rules, a lot of people are finding it quite shocking and quite difficult to be told, well, you were once a good or outstanding teacher, you might now only be satisfactory. And I think the one thing I would say there is leave your ego at the door. It's not about that, it's not about you, it's about playing the game, it's about working with the strictures that you've got that are now in place. Concentrate
on some key areas, some key messages, and there may be one or two key messages that you have to give, that you give them in that conversation, in that professional conversation you've set up, and then discuss. And if you do that way, you are more likely not to get resentment.
Having a culture of constructive criticism can remove the ego from the equation. If everybody's constantly saying, well, this was good, maybe that needs work, that can be very beneficial for everybody, and nobody feels at any time that they're being criticised negatively. It's all about supporting each other and working better.
The person who says yes, yes, and means no is quite a difficult one to deal with. And I think they have to be, once they know that's what that person does, then it's about actually setting up much smaller targets. It's about checking, constantly checking, are you getting on with it? So that somebody like that will need closer monitoring. Somebody who's just seems to be being awkward and is saying it's not in my job, It might be a sit down and say, well, what is in your job? Let's have a look at what your job is, and this is what I expect you to do. And if you don't like it, then, you know, go to the head. Too often we don't really consider the well-being of our leaders, and I do think it's important, because if they don't look after themselves, they burn out.
This can be a very self-punishing profession. Good teachers, committed teachers, the urge to push yourself, you know, do the extra hour after work, get in early, do the work at the weekends, do the work in the holidays. You're the only person that will be able to stop you doing that and keep your work-life balance.
You've got to accept that when you become a head of year or a head of house, you cannot do any work that you used to do in school time, like all your planning, your assessment, that's all got to be done outside of school, because when you're in school, your job's very reactive, and you can try to be proactive, but a lot of it is fighting fires. And I think you've got to accept that you can't be everything to everyone all the time.
Sometimes it's about them being able to be open and frank to their senior leaders and say, I can't do this, or I'd love to do it, but what else can I leave? Or I'd love to do it, but I can't do it now. I can do it in 2 weeks' time. Being honest about what's manageable instead of trying to take on the world.
There's a tendency with heavy workload to congregate in your faculty, but I think you need to take time to spend time in the staff room and try and do the almost impossible thing, which is take some time to not do work if possible, just sit and relax.
Work smart, don't work hard, work smart. But, you know, if you cut corners, there are ways of cutting corners that are just as effective as doing it the really long, time-consuming way. I think that comes with doing the job over a number of years, though, doesn't it? Like, the longer you do the job, the easier it is to cut corners. But definitely learn to work smart. Just because you're putting in loads of hours doesn't mean you're necessarily doing the best job.
I always use the example of an aircraft where people you're told to put the oxygen on yourself before you put it on others, you share it with others. And I think that's what middle leaders have got to think about.